You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we're discussing This Might Be Satire, track number 10 from 1993's How to Clean Everything album. And we did a little digging and found out that How to Clean Everything is the 9th best-selling record of all time on Fat Records, according to their best-selling rankings on their web store.
That's actually kind of cool. I found that list as well, and I noticed that that's the only propaganda in the top listings. So apparently this record is like the one that commercially moved the most, probably ever. And, you know, I've been a little enthralled with propaganda vinyl lately. If anybody who's been following us on social media, you know, they can probably tell that I have many propaganda records. I have tons of Recess records, propaganda stuff. I've got the Fat stuff. I've gotten a few rare things. And I did a little digging on the different pressings of this record just for fun. And I found the 1993 press is black vinyl with an orange label in the middle. There is a 2007 repress of 1,028 copies on a gold translucent vinyl. Then there is the 20-year remix remaster on black, but then there's also 749 copies with a blue and yellow swirl, 523 copies on translucent sea blue sold through the band's website. And then lastly, there is the Fat Records store exclusive edition that had 97 copies pressed. And that's not very many, 97 copies total. And it's yellowish and has some flecks of blue, it looks like, from a photo that I saw on eBay recently. And so that's kind of cool. Get a little information on some of the available versions of this album. I absolutely love the 2013 20th anniversary edition as well. I'm really glad that exists because it allowed for something to get heard, I think, which is really important. And those are the demos that they added to the end of the digital edition. I think they're probably on the CD edition as well. It's not on the vinyl edition. But there are these demos at the end of the 2013 version that has Middle Finger Response, Hate Myth, Muscle Etiquette, This Might Be Satire, and Fuck Machine that got recorded in Canada prior to the recording of the actual record. And while he's not on this episode, we do have an episode in the works with the person who recorded the demo that appears on the 20th anniversary edition. And that's Conrad Sichler, who appears in the liner notes of How to Clean Everything. He appears in the liner notes of Where Quality is Job One, Where Quantity is Job One. Conrad was the singer in Toothpick Hercules with John K. Sampson and Stephen Carroll, and he still performs under the name Riot Nerd. So in the middle of Middle Finger Response on the demo version, at the end of that 2013 remix remaster, Chris sings, "Except for Conrad Sichler," at the end of where he's like, "And that's 3 billion snotty fuck yous. Except for Conrad Sichler." And I absolutely love that. So Conrad recorded the demo version, those 4 demos that appear at the end of the 2013 remix remaster. So he recorded the original demo version of This Might Be Satire, which was done in the lead up to How to Clean Everything. And, you know, it's not on the vinyl, like I said, but if you haven't heard those demos at the end of How to Clean Everything's 20th anniversary reissue, they're fantastic. And so some of you out there may not even know those exist, but you can listen to it on the digital edition on Spotify and iTunes and whatever. But I really like the hearing the original version they did with Conrad before they flew down. So that was really something that I dug into a lot this week, was those 4 demos.
Well, Greg, to add to what you found regarding the vinyl and the re-releases, I went back and I rewatched a video on YouTube from a show in 1996 in Kansas City. And I'm pretty sure you and I have both referenced this previously.
Yeah, we've seen that video.
Right. And we must have talked about it on another episode, but there's a medley of This Might Be Satire, Fuck Machine, Hate Myth, Muscle Etiquette, those three songs. And there's an intro where Chris and John K. Sampson address the topics and why these are connected. And I'm going to read here what Chris and then John K. Sampson said. Chris says, we have a couple more songs that are all attached. And they're all attached. And then Jord yells, a medley.
Yeah.
He yells out, because the topics of the songs are all interdependent, meaning the forms of oppression the songs are talking about are interdependent. Racism, sexism, homophobia, animal exploitation, they're all interconnected. It's all the same bullshit. It's all the same kind of stuff we got to fight against. And then John K. Sampson goes on to say, and within our little communities, you can see the obvious sexism because women aren't as involved as men, because obviously they don't feel as comfortable as men do. This little boys club we call the punk scene.
Yeah.
And I think hearing how this song fit in with those others made me kind of think about it a little differently as I was preparing for our talk this week.
Yeah, and that's a really important video to me as well, because I'm from Missouri and I was 13 in 1996 when that was filmed, and it was just down I-70 across the state of Missouri from my house that was happening. So, it's if they had done that a couple years later in St. Louis, like I could have seen that exact performance. But
right.
I do find it really interesting that they were playing This Might Be Satire as late as 1996. I only found one other performance of it in a 1993 performance that they did in California, and there's another video of it, but I've really only seen a couple of videos of this out there. But that's really interesting too, to think about those three songs as like a little trilogy within How to Clean Everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't really thought of that, and I'm really excited too, because I know that we're going to be doing an episode on Fuck Machine in the coming weeks, because I have a guest lined up for that one. So that'll be really cool to see if we can make a few more parallels in the coming weeks. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, Greg, let's get to this week's guest then. Who do we got?
So we have a fantastic guest from Winnipeg who is connected to Propagandy in a couple of ways. Our guest is Ryan Nash. Ryan plays bass and keys in Agassi with David Gies, aka The Beeve, and Derek Hogue, who is formerly of G7 Welcoming Committee Records, Escape Velocity Radio, and Silence Equals. And interestingly, Derek's band Silence Equals had their 1994 demo recorded on a 4-track by Chris Hanna. And Chris also remixed some of their 1990s recordings in 2017, which is all available online at silenceequals.com. So if you want to hear some of Derek's old stuff, everybody will know Derek because of Escape Velocity Radio, that fantastic podcast they did for a while.
Yeah.
But on this episode, we talk about far more than just This Might Be Satire. As a lifelong Winnipeg musician, Ryan has seen and done much, and his music is tangentially adjacent to Propagandy in so many ways, which this conversation brings out. We talk about Beeve's guitar playing a lot too, because Ryan's a guitar player. So I'm like, tell me about playing in a band on not your primary instrument with Beeve, who is just, such a special player. So we got really super geeky about Beeve and playing with Beeve. Agassi's music is also recorded by John Paul Peters, engineer extraordinaire at Winnipeg's amazing Private Ear Recording, who was also our guest for our Negretto episode. And Agassi was also Chris Hanna's backing band on his Patreon virtual 7-inch, where he covered Voivod's Panorama. So many listeners out there, if they're subscribed to Chris's Patreon, can go and listen to that. If you haven't heard it in a bit, or if you haven't heard it at all, Ryan plays bass on Chris's cover of Voivod Panorama, which is super awesome. And we do talk about that in the interview as well. We talk about working with Chris for that Patreon virtual 7-inch. So if you haven't heard Agassi, they're fantastic. They're an instrumental band. Beef plays guitar. So you'll recognize a lot of the fantastic flair that people loved from the guitar playing in Supporting Cast and Failed States, but you can find them at agassiband.bandcamp.com. and you can order that LP that they made, which will come delivered and hand-packed by G7 Welcoming Committee Records alum Derek Hogue himself. Mine came from Derek, and I was so delighted to get that. It was kind of like, holy smokes, it's like the inner circle. So without further delay, please enjoy my conversation with Ryan Nash from Agassi. Ryan Nash, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hey, great to be here.
Ryan, it's awesome to have you. I'm just wondering if we can start off by you having you introduce yourself to the audience just a little bit so people can know who you are and what you do in the world.
Sure. Well, I play in a band called Agassi. I play bass in a band with Beeve, who used to be in propaganda, and Derek, who used to help out with G7 Records. And I guess that's my probably my connection to the podcast.
Awesome. Well, did you grow up in the Winnipeg area? Are you originally from Manitoba?
Yeah, I've always lived here my whole life.
Nice. How did you, get into music? Like, I'm curious about what your introduction to the scene was and how you found the punk scene and whatever you got into. Tell me about your introduction to that local music scene.
For me, it was kind of when I was growing up, I had pretty musical parents. So they were always listening to records around the house, and they used to volunteer at this folk festival every year. You probably heard of it, I guess, if you lived in Saskatchewan, the Winnipeg Folk Festival.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So they used to work that every year. And so the first probably 12, 13 years of my life, I guess, every summer I would spend it at the folk festival and hanging out with crew and musicians and stuff like that. So I think that was kind of where I got into the idea of you can play in a band, and it's not it's not some mystical thing, and I just started playing guitar when I was a kid, getting into metal and shit.
Nice.
I was big into all that hair metal stuff, like Kiss and Motley Crue and all that. And so I started playing guitar, and then I don't know, I just one way or another kind of found myself into playing in bands, and then that led to getting into punk rock, mostly through skateboarding, I guess, if I think about it. Yeah, getting into punk through that, and that's kind of how I found my way into the local scene, was just being a guitar player and listening to that kind of music. Especially at that time, there wasn't a lot of people that were really, were doing that around me. So it was like you'd meet one other kid, and you'd be like, "All right, we're buddies."
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of years are we talking about here? What's your time frame?
Well, I guess I probably started playing shows 92, 93-ish, I guess. I would have been 14.
Nice. Did you grow up going to shows like the Albert and stuff like that?
Yeah, I was right into the Albert scene there for sure. Yeah.
Nice.
That was pretty much where most of the kids, at that age, I'm 13 or 14, they used to do these Sunday matinee shows at the Albert. And so because there was this weird thing with the drinking laws back in the day where you couldn't drink on a Sunday, so all these local bars would essentially open up to all ages shows. So all these little punk kids we'd go and put on shows at the Albert on a Sunday. And then that was kind of how we ended up meeting older bands and getting more involved with the wider punk scene, because it all started, it was high school battle of the bands kind of deals,
Nice. Did you what are some of the early shows that you remember seeing, either at the Albert or at other venues around town, that kind of made you feel whoa, this is really where I belong, this feels good?
Well, I mean, I like I said, I started kind of in the high school battle of the band scene, so there was none of that going on there. It was just kind of random bands. But I think the first through that, I started meeting some people and going to they used to do this punk festival every summer in Winnipeg called Core Fest.
Yeah, I've seen videos of it.
Oh yeah. It was. It's too bad they don't do it anymore. Me and some buddies have actually talked about maybe trying to resurrect it, but it was super cool. It was basically again, it was all ages, so you could go when you were 13, 14. It was free, so we were broke, we didn't have any money, but all the good local bands would play those things, like Propaganda, Malfaction. But that was my introduction to the wider local music scene. And through that's when I kind of started going to see bands like Propaganda played at Core Fest one year, And then that was kind of how I got into going to see bands like I Spy, you know, because I would hear about, you know, people be throwing flyers out at Core Fest, and then you'd kind of get hooked into that. And also there was this thing that I also found through Core Fest was Winnipeg used to have this phone number called the Hardcore Hotline.
Nice.
And it was like this phone number where you could call, which was awesome for us. I mean, pre-internet, you know, if you were like a 14-year-old kid living, you know, in a working class suburb or something, like nobody's putting posters up around there. So it was like you could call this phone number and they would just list all the shows that were going on. So that
Nice. Well, you know, Ryan, I don't think anybody on this show that we've ever had as a guest has specifically talked about seeing I Spy live. Do you have any standout? Yeah. Do you have any standout memories of seeing Todd's band?
Man. I Spy to this day is my absolute favorite punk rock band. Yeah, I mean, I didn't see them a lot of times because right around the time when I was starting to go see them, within months of that, they broke up, and then Todd was in Propagandy. So I remember seeing, yeah, actually the hottest show I've ever been to was an I Spy show at the West End Cultural Center in the summertime. It was remember they had that split with Bud Alive. Yeah, so Bud Alive, I guess, I don't know if they were touring with them or what, but they ended up in Winnipeg. And so there was like an I Spy Bud Alive show at the West End. And it was like one of those like ridiculous hot summer days where it's like, you know, 36, super humid. And that's back in the day, there's no air conditioning or anything.
Yeah.
It was, and yeah, I remember that because I remember I was 14 and I went to the, you know, the merch table or whatever, and I didn't have any money. I had probably like $5. And Todd was nice enough to give me some free stickers. So that left a good impression with me, I guess.
Man, those are the most important moments ever, aren't they? When you just have that positive interaction with somebody that you just saw up on a stage doing something that you were like, whoa, that's so cool. And then you actually see the person and they like do you a solid like that. Those memories just stick with you forever, don't they?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, especially for me, like being at that age, like being a guitar player, like I'm mostly a guitar player and drummer actually. But just watching him shred live was incredible. I loved it.
I love it. Well, whenever we had Todd on the show on our Dark Matters episode, we had him talking about his early days of playing live. He's like, my only goal was to go crazy, was to go nuts. And I'm glad to hear that experience.
They were definitely one of those, they were definitely like a fun band to watch, you know, and like any good band, like they were rampaging when they were playing. It was great.
Yeah, I was listening to Perversity is Spreading the other night, and I was just like, man, this is just the best. I just can't even get over how great it is. And
it's funny because I think at that Bud Alive show, I'm pretty sure I Spy played Fuck the Border.
Nice. Well, yeah, there was they had early incarnations and performances of that within that band before he brought it over to Propaganda, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it was cool because it was like I saw I Spy play it, and then a few months later, I don't know if it was like the Less Talk CD release show maybe, or just their next show in Winnipeg, but it was like Todd's first show with the band, and then they play Fuck the Border. Propaganda plays, and I was just like, holy shit, that's an I Spy song.
You know, and whenever you saw him play it live, they probably played the version where he was saying fuck the border really quickly, like fuck the border, fuck the border, fuck the border. Like he was singing it differently in the early versions compared to what it became on today's Empires. But, you know, that's so cool to have that memory. I'm so glad you got to see that. That's awesome.
It was really cool. And actually, I think that was, I'm pretty sure that show, Todd's first show there with them at the U of M. I'm pretty sure that was the show, the sample that kicks off Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. I'm pretty sure that was the show where that sample was from.
Yeah. Okay, so let's turn over to
I might be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that.
Oh, that's fine. So let's turn over to Propaganda. When did you see Propaganda for the first time, and then maybe talk about some other experiences of seeing them live over the years? You've probably seen them a few times at this point, I would imagine.
Yeah, at this point, I've seen them a lot. The first one was probably the Core Fest one. And that was, I was kind of like just getting familiar with them. And it's a funny story about Propaganda is, originally I didn't know they were from Winnipeg when I first heard them. Like this, because it was back in, this is like early 90s, I guess. And, you'd like trade tapes with people to find new bands and stuff. And so I would, just anybody I could, like, I'd see somebody's older sister wearing an All shirt or something. I'd be like, hey man, give your sister this tape and see if she could tape me some records. And so somebody had taped me, I think it was like Bad Religion, No Control on one side, and then it was How to Clean Everything on the other side. But the guy didn't know what they were called, so he was like, I think they're called Propaganda or something like that. So I was
Yeah.
like, so I'm listening to this tape, and obviously it's blowing my mind. The riffs, this, just how raging it is, and then I saw the Rather Be Flag Burning split, just kind of like at this local skate shop or whatever, and I was like, Propagandy. And then it was called I'd Rather Be Flag Burning, and on How to Clean Everything, there's that like stick the flag up your ass song or whatever. So I'm like, I think this is the band. I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna buy this. So I got that, and then I'm like reading the liner notes, and it's like the mailing address is like something. I think it was like like Corden Avenue or something, Winnipeg.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the fuck? Like these guys are from Winnipeg? Like it was just mind blowing because I was just kind of getting into like more like before that, the only punk I'd listened to was kind of like older stuff, like I'd listen to like Dead Kennedys, Suicidal, or Ramones, but it was all before kind of it wasn't of like my generation, I guess. And so then I'm hearing this Propaganda band who's becoming like one of my favorite bands, and then I just found out they're from Winnipeg. I'm like, totally blows my mind. And then I find out a few weeks later from that, I think it was like a few weeks later from that or something, that they were playing at like Core Fest. So I saw them at Core Fest originally, probably would have been the first time I saw them.
Nice.
And then, like I said, then I saw I Spy kind of in between there. And then I was bummed because I was like, I heard I Spy broke up, and I'm like, well, fuck, like they were like my favorite band at that point. And but then I heard Todd was joining Propaganda. So then of course that was like super awesome because I'm like, okay, there's like my two favorite bands are kind of like joining forces now.
Mm.
And and then so like the next time I saw them was probably that University of Manitoba show around the Less Talk era, I think, where that was like Todd's first show. But I've seen him a lot of times. I mean, in Winnipeg, and we would sometimes drive maybe to like they play in like Brandon or something. We'd go see him in Brandon.
Have you seen like every era of the band, like Samson, then the Kowalski Trio, and then
I was like tail end of the Samson era. So like Samson, I think if I remember correctly, played the Core Fest show.
I believe he did. Because I watched a couple videos from one of those Core Fest shows, and I think that John was there. So, and then obviously you saw him with Todd. And but did you see them like with Todd before Beeve joined, like just as that trio?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because there was a few shows. They didn't play that often in Winnipeg, to be honest. Like it was more so now, but like back then they really didn't play in Winnipeg that often. So it was kind of like usually like once per era, or maybe twice you'd see them. So yeah, I saw them in like the Less Talk era, then the Today's Empires era. That was actually, I think that was the Brandon show. And maybe I missed the next one was what, Potemkin?
Yeah.
I think I may have missed that show because that was right when I was like playing in bands and touring a lot, so I wasn't in Winnipeg very often, so I may have missed that era. But I've seen pretty much every era of Propaganda, every iteration of the band. Yeah.
Did you see them? Well, actually, let me ask this question. Did you know Beeve before he was in Propaganda, when he was in Giant Sons?
Yeah, me and Beeve actually go kind of back. I think the first time I met Beeve was probably like 97, because he was taking this like a recording course at this place called Mid Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up recording one of my earlier bands. I think it was and actually there's a G7 connection there too, I guess, because the bass player was the guy from Malfaction, who I know G7 released some of their last couple of records, maybe Mike. But he recorded our band, and I didn't like know him, like he was kind of, I knew the guy who was kind of running that studio, so we used to like snake in there to get free recording time on these quote unquote student sessions, right? So they'd have the kids, or not kids, but the students record some band, and they wouldn't charge a band. So he recorded that. And then Giant Sons, my old band, the Down and Out, we kind of like we would always do shows with Giant Sons, and we toured with them. So I kind of knew him from that. And then he was actually going to join our band, where we were going to start an instrumental band. Cause I remember like Giant Sons was another one of my favorite local bands. Anybody who hasn't checked that out really should check that stuff out. They had those 2 records they did are phenomenal. And so I was always like, man, we got to start an instrumental band, Beef. Come on. And then our band had kind of broken up. We were kind of like in between things. And then right away he joined Propaganda. So that was I kind of knew him before joining Propaganda. So
Nice. So you must know. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say that's how I met all the other guys in the band, was just through Beef, you know.
Nice. So you must know Robbie and David from Giant Sons as well, then.
Yeah.
Nice. Robbie and David are both hopefully going to be coming on the show in the not too distant future. I've been in touch with both of them, and it's just super awesome to see all the Winnipeg web of musicians that just kind of spreads outward. You know what I mean? It's an awesome story to tell.
Well, because it's a small place, eh? So at some point, yeah, we always laugh. We're like, at some point you're going to be in a band with everybody else. Like, it kind of works out that way. Or like there would often be this thing where like, there'd be like 5 or 6 bands, and it's basically the same members, just in different configurations. Like, in one band, so and so plays bass, and then the other one he's playing drums, and then she's playing guitar, and then she sings in the other band. It's like that's a very common thing in Winnipeg.
I'm curious.
Robbie would be a really great guest, though. He's an interesting guy. Kutch is an interesting guy too. Yeah, you should have both those guys on. It'd be fun to talk to.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely going to. And I'm curious a little more about Beeve as well, because you're in Agassiz currently with Beeve. So post Propaganda, Beeve, you, and Derek Hogue, who is well known for Escape Velocity Radio, for G7 Welcoming Committee, playing drums with Agassiz. I'm curious about the formation of Agassiz in Beeve's post Propaganda days.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to before he was in Propaganda. We'd always kind of talked about starting an instrumental band together. It was just we were both really into that kind of stuff, and I just kind of ran into him one day. It was what was it? It was at a Tortoise show. That band Tortoise. We just kind of ran into each other at actually it's funny because it was at the West End Cultural Center where that Super Sweaty Eye Spy show happened. Yeah, and I was just kind of catching up with him, and he was talking about how him and Derek were just kind of jamming, doing some instrumental stuff. And I was like, oh, instrumental stuff. And he mentioned that the only thing they were missing was a bass player. So of course, me not being a bass player, I said, well, I'll play bass.
Yeah.
Well, I'll do, I'll play keyboards if it's an instrumental band with Beef. So yeah, so we just kind of ended up, we started jamming, but they already had a handful of songs, and yeah, it just gelled really well. It we all get along and like making music together. And so, yeah, we just kept writing and just doing stuff, not playing shows. We don't play a lot of shows, but put out a record, and yeah, just kind of, I mean, obviously with the pandemic and stuff, we've been on ice a little bit here and there for the last year, but more plans to hopefully hit the studio soon. So,
Ryan, I'm curious about what you feel like makes an instrumental band able to be successful, because so many bands are so reliant on vocals and vocal melodies to kind of draw in audiences. Do you guys have like a thought on what makes an instrumental band able to achieve any success in what they're doing?
I guess it depends how you define success. For me,
good music.
Yeah, for me, it's just good music. I mean, it is in terms of connecting with people. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think instrumental music in today's era, it maybe for rock people who listen to that kind of stuff, it's a little weird, or it's a little out there. They're not used to that. They're waiting for a chorus or something like that, I guess, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. For me, it's funny because I always listen to a lot of instrumental music. Whether it was some of the indie rock stuff like Don Caballero, or there was a really great Canadian band. I think they're from Montreal, called Weights and Measures.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they had some really awesome stuff in the
God, I may have even seen them live in Saskatoon, actually.
Oh, really? Oh,
maybe.
I'm extremely jealous.
That
was one of my like main bands, I think, for a chunk there in the early 2000s. But yeah, it's I've always kind of listened to that. I mean, I also like, a lot of older, I like all kinds of music. So like, I like, a lot of like jazz stuff, for example, is instrumental, or, Afrobeat stuff's instrumental. I love hip hop instrumentals. So I don't know, for me, I guess just with what I listen to, it's not it's not really weird. But yeah, I think the funniest thing is when we play a show and it's like, the guy's like, "Oh, do you guys need a mic?" And it's like, I don't know, do we? Like, am I gonna talk to anybody during the show? We're gonna, but then I figure I should at least, not be a jerk and acknowledge that there's people standing there too, So
Are you guys chatty from the stage whenever you play shows?
I'm chatty.
Nice.
I'm usually the guy with the mic, and Beef doesn't want to say anything. Derek doesn't want to say anything, which is fine. But I don't. It's funny because I usually I'll talk, I'll say hi basically, and then we'll play the set, and then I'll say, hey, thanks for watching us play. That's about it. But maybe during the show we get the odd good heckler maybe, and we can have a back and forth hopefully. But
That's
not a lot of
awesome.
talking. Yeah, we're all about the music. We just stick to the music.
You guys have played a couple shows with Propaganda, haven't you?
Let me think. I think we played one. I think our first show was opening for Propaganda.
Your first show.
Our first show. Me personally, I've played with them before because my other band Union Stockyards opened for Propaganda. I'm in 3 bands, so
nice.
I have that problem. But yeah, we opened for Propaganda once, and then Agassi opened for Propaganda once as well.
Fabulous. Do you have any, standout memories of any of those shows of, being on a stage in front of a whole bunch of people there to see Propaganda? How does that feel?
Well, it was, it's for me, it was awesome. You know what I mean? Like like being in 3 bands, I'm always playing shows. So, I mean, there's nothing, it's not, I don't get like nerve wracked about playing a show or anything like that. But I know Beav and Derek at that point had not played a show in years, and Derek especially, I think he was saying he hadn't played a show in like 15 years or something. I was like, oh my God, buddy. Because I know how I felt. Like there was a period for about a year where I wasn't in a band in, the sort of like 2010-ish something area. And I remember my first show back, it was a little bit nerve wracking. I was, oh shit, I haven't done this in a long time. And so he hadn't played a show in 15 years. I felt like it was probably almost a little bit weird for Beef, in some ways, because it's like, okay, now you're opening up for your old band, and nobody knows who the hell Agassi is, but then they're going to see you get on stage. They're going to be like, wait a minute, isn't that the guy from Propaganda? And it's like, I felt like from his perspective, he's probably like, oh, people are going to be like, what's going on here? But and it was a little nerve wracking just because we'd never played a show together, and then all of a sudden your first show is this pretty big show, and there's like a crew for sound, and you're like, oh shit, like I'm used to playing little venues and stuff like that. But it was a great show. It was awesome.
Nice.
And the crowd was very nice to us. I thought the crowd was very nice to us for being an instrumental band. Totally not the same style as Propaganda. Although that's kind of par for the course. I find Propaganda is one of the rare bands that whenever they play a show, they don't just get a bunch of openers that sound exactly like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Which I always appreciated.
I'm curious if you can speak to Beav's guitar playing at all. There's a lot of people who will hear this interview who admire Beav's playing a lot and what he brought to Propaganda and how he almost served as like a transition point for their growth into, supporting cast. Like Beav was so essential. Can you describe a little bit about what it feels like to play in a band with Beav, about like anything that's like unique or special about the way he plays guitar that you appreciate?
Well, playing in the band with Beav is phenomenal, even though I'm playing bass, but I'm a guitar player primarily. My other 2 bands, I play guitar. And so, being able to watch that dude write songs, the songwriting is, I think for me, the thing that blows my mind the most with Beav is he'll send me these, he'll send me like a text with like him playing guitar with no amp in his house, and it's like a full song, and it's amazing, and then I'll instantly just start getting ideas from, like, he's one of those guys that when you or one of those guitar players where, like, when you're just when you're around his creativity, it makes you creative. I love that about him. But also just as a guitar player, he was one of those people that always just had a very unique style of playing. Like I said, like I remember watching him pre-Propaganda in Giant Sons or March December Swing. And he was always one of those people who just had a unique style. Like, you could tell, like, okay, this this guy's practicing. He's putting a lot of thought into this, whereas like, at punk shows when you're that age, it's like most people are not playing the most interesting music. But for me, that's the thing that I always liked about punk, and to an extent about Propaganda, I Spy, Beefs playing, was it was musically interesting, and I don't know, man, he uses a lot of cool chords. He's so creative with his time signature stuff and like the way that he structures his songs, and the way he uses his effects to me is really interesting too. And that, to me, that was like kind of the thing that he brought to Propaganda. Was before Behave, it was kind of like they were like a straight up rampaging punk band kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then once he got in the band, it was, and like I said, like knowing him and watching him play guitar for years before that, it was like, yeah, you could really see the influence that he had in terms of like all of a sudden there was like these atmospheric spatial things going on in Propaganda that it was like, whoa, where's this coming from,
Mm.
and different parts and clean guitars, and yeah, he's a unique personality and a unique player for sure.
Yeah, our listeners have really loved hearing from Beav on some of our episodes, and hopefully we'll have him back on the show as well. But I'm glad that you could articulate that, because when somebody is special in a certain way, I think that it's awesome to acknowledge it and talk about what we like about those things and how people inspire us. It just makes me happy to hear those kinds of stories.
Yeah, because oftentimes I think it's almost subconscious. Like you're just. For a lot of people, myself included, sometimes it's like, I don't know why I like certain things, or why I want to listen to certain players, or why certain bands just, make my head explode, but they do. And I love talking about that. I love trying to get to the bottom of like, what is it about this that's special?
Mm,
You can
I
never put
love
your
it.
finger on it. It's totally subjective, but it's fun to talk about. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And we go to the ends of the earth to be as dorky and nerdy here as we possibly can for this particular podcast, which is why, too much to the chagrin of some of our listeners, some of our episodes go on for hours and hours.
Hey, you know what? Long form podcasting is doing pretty well these days. It to me goes to show that people, when I was younger, I used to love listening to CBC would always have like talk programs where they just have two people sit down and talk for like 2 hours. I love that stuff.
I love it too. And I'm glad that you appreciate it, Ryan, because you are so welcome here. So let's talk a little bit of about how to clean everything. You mentioned earlier how you found it when somebody dubbed it for you on a cassette. But, tell me about like the importance of this particular record in your life before we dive into the song under discussion. This might be Satire.
It's it's hard to overstate how awesome that record is, especially when you put it in the context of that era. To me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I remember hearing other Fat Records bands, and like that kind of stuff was like the shit at the time, like
Mm-hmm.
Fat Records, Epitaph, and like all those kind of pop punk bands, Lagwagon, all those kind of things, No Effects and everything. And they were cool. Like I heard those bands and I was like, yeah, that's cool. But when you heard Propaganda, it was like it was almost like that. I guess like for me, like I growing up in the 80s and being really into metal and like thrash and like Slayer and Exodus and like all that kind of stuff. It was like then getting into punk, it was like the only thing that was missing from a lot of punk, like I said, was kind of like the musicianship sometimes. And like for me, maybe as a guitar player, I just found it interesting. But like I remember hearing How to Clean Everything, and like start to finish that record, it's so unique compared to everything else that kind of came out in that era. Like I always feel like you often hear people say like, oh yeah, like Propaganda's the band that like all the bands on Fat thought were awesome,
Mm.
and I get that. Like they're almost like a musician kind of band
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. Like they're just kind of, there's some other level of complexity and depth to those records. I mean, all the records compared to a lot of their peers, that I think that's what got it for me. And then of course, like I said, like just having that weird thing where like I'm listening to this band, I'm loving it, I'm like listening to these guitar riffs, and I remember like the chords on How to Clean Everything, like none of the other bands were using those kind of chords, and I would like take them. I had this guy who was teaching me guitar at the time, and I would like take him How to Clean Everything, and I'd be like, man, what the fuck? Like, what are these chords that these guys are playing? And he would show me like one or two of them, and then it was like, okay, that was like my guitar fuel for like the next 6 months. Was like, oh, okay, I got two new chords, But that record is just it's just a deep well of riffs, and the vocals are awesome. The drumming, I mean, I was also drumming at that time, and like listening to George play, like that record is faster than anything else that came out in that era. Like it's a little bit faster.
And the drums feel differently too, because Jord was like a metalhead. So
well, I don't know if this is true or not. I have no idea. I can't remember if I've asked Jord about this or not, but I may have. But the rumor that I heard was that like Jordan, I guess like earlier on, like when he'd been playing drumming, that he started with like polka drumming or something. You ever heard that?
No.
Okay. But apparently there was some like polka connection, I guess. And like polka music is like very like, like a, not like the other, like the other Fat Records bands always had that sort of like, like the double kick drum beat. But his was more like the thrash bands. Like his was more like a Slayer drum beat.
Exactly.
And so it was just that little bit faster, But yeah, his drumming was a huge influence on me too.
And the difference, that subtle difference between that kick drum style on like a No Effects record versus a Slayer record, the difference is extremely important in the way that the record feels. And that's why Propaganda's drums have always felt so much different to me than all those other bands in that era,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. He's and like just he's got this like his tom fills, for example. Like maybe I'm getting a little nerdy here, but
no, go for it.
His tom fills. I mean, who I don't know. If I had to have an inspiration for tom fills, it's Jord,
Well, and JP over at Private Ear, who I'm sure
JP.
We had him on for the Negretto episode, and he was like, Jord doesn't recycle his fills. Like if you go through and listen to it, it's very, very purposeful, and they're very creative, and he doesn't just rehash the same thing over and over. It's very purposeful and well thought out.
Those are like his guitar solos.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love it. Well, so Ryan, whenever I reached out to you, we've been chatting for a couple weeks via email and everything about like songs and being on the show. And you landed on a song from How to Clean Everything, which I'm very relieved that you chose because it's not the first one that most guests want to jump at.
Caveat, I will admit it's certainly not my favorite song on the record.
That's fine.
And it's certainly not one of my favorite songs, but it was on How to Clean Everything, and I the reason why I picked that one is I wanted to pick a song from How to Clean.
So what is your favorite song from How to Clean Everything?
Oh God. I mean, the whole record is just my favorite record of that kind of like era of stuff, but like well, my favorite song is probably Hate Myth Muscle Etiquette, Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread.
Nice
one for me. And Head, Chest, or Foot.
Nice.
Like I like those kind of songs. I like the Anti-Manifesto, yeah, there's so many good songs on that record.
Well, we're not going to talk about any of those songs.
No, we'll talk about this one.
We're going to talk about This Might Be Satire. So tell me a little bit about This Might Be Satire. And like before we go into it, like to me, the most essential component of This Might Be Satire is what you were alluding to earlier, the riffs. And I'm wondering,
cool song. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about the music of this song. What stands out to you? What jumps out? What makes you?
Well, I always thought, to me, when I listened to this song on the record, when I guess first heard it or whatever, I always thought it like one of the things I always appreciated about punk rock versus other kinds of music was it always had like a sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
Like there was always kind of this element of punk bands kind of like doing goofy shit and like poking fun at things, and they could be serious, but they could also be kind of like I mean, it was almost kind of like a cliche actually in that 90s era. Like it almost got a little too goofy, like they're like bands doing classic rock covers all the time, and like Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It became kind of like a cliche, I guess. But I at first I always appreciated that about punk, that it was like it could be goofy, and I thought this song was almost like a really clever goofy song, and like Prop has those kind of like oddball songs, you know what I mean, like Ska Sucks or Haile Selassie or Only Good Fascists Are Dead Fascists, those kind of songs, which are kind of like it's not like your typical Propaganda song, I guess, but they're cool on the record, like they're fun songs to listen to on the record. I always thought this song was kind of one of those, and it was like this really clever kind of juxtaposition of like cock rock
Mm-hmm.
over the subject matter, I thought that was really clever.
Mm.
I guess maybe because I had listened to cock rock when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was well versed in like how goofy that scene was, and how, especially like I said with the subject matter of the song, it just kind of like it all played into that. I was like, man, that's like a really clever, like almost like a comedian would write a joke. Like they made this song that's kind of like makes you think, and it also kind of is funny, and it also kind of is goofy, but then the riffs are really good, and it's actually kind of a good song in some ways, like. So it was always a very interesting song on that record, I guess. But like I said, it was not, it wasn't the one that I would skip to first to listen to that song, But I
Do
would appreciate it. Yeah.
do any of the any of the musicianship stand out to you specifically from any parts of the song? Do you have any like favorite parts?
Well, it was the first inclination that I had that maybe these guys were into classic rock or something like that.
Mm.
Like the riffs kind of had that vibe, and then they're doing the Cheap Trick song, and then there's like the by the way, I stole this riff. It's like you're like, and again, like for me as a kid hearing that stuff, like my first guitar teacher was like a shredder guy, like he had like a Kramer guitar with like a Floyd Rose whammy bar and shit.
Yeah.
And he's like, like this is how you want to play, he'd do like Van Halen, like tapping, or like Nuno Betancourt riffs or something. I don't know. But like, so it was like, that was always in my sphere. And then like, I liked some of this, like I said, like my parents growing up were listening to like Hendrix and shit, and like, that kind of stuff. So like, I had an appreciation for like good guitar playing. And then you hear this band and they're doing all these cool riffs, and their songs aren't just kind of like,
Yeah.
like their songs are complex and interesting, and they move a lot, and it was like, yeah, the riffs on this song, I mean, it was a catchy song. You know what I mean? I actually, was funny because one of the other things I found about this song was, like I was growing up in an era where like nobody really liked punk rock that much yet, and so like there wasn't like a whole bunch of people who were like into punk that were like friends of mine or like I was hanging out with necessarily. Like most of the people from school, like, they knew like the Ramones and maybe like, like Green Day or something like that. And it was funny because like I would, you'd go to like a party or something like that, and or like you'd be at the cabin or whatever, and I'd put Propaganda on, and this fucking song was like there was a lot of like jock dudes who actually didn't know it was a joke, who thought it was a fucking great song. It was really weird,
Oh my God.
Like I remember like listening to it at school and stuff, and like yeah, like jock dudes were like, oh yeah, this is cool, like who's this band, It's like, oh God, if you start listening to this band, I wouldn't tell them.
So, what's really interesting to me is like you pick up on their like classic rock vibe, like the guitar noodly vibe, like the Cheap Trick. But then I also thought about a few months ago when Eddie Van Halen passed away. Chris Hanna put something up on his Twitter as a picture of a poster that he had in his bedroom when he was a kid of Eddie Van Halen with that famous red guitar, like down on his knees, like way high up on the fretboard. And Chris is like, yeah, I woke up every day and I looked at that poster and I was like, man, that's so wicked,
Yeah. Well,
it's kind of like that.
Chris he's a little bit older than me. He's a few years older than me, but like, yeah, there was just like an era back in the day when it was like, if you were into playing guitar, like you probably had guitar magazines, for example, and you were probably, just, like that's how I got into jazz, was just being a guitar player. And then this friend of mine who was a jazz drummer was like, man, you got to hear these guitar players. So he started playing me like guitar players, and it was like, I can't deny how good that is. Like if I hear that, I'm just like, okay, that is amazing. I want to listen to more of that, like just being a guitar player, I think is like my window into it, maybe most people will be like, it just sounds like a guy noodling, you know what I mean? But so guitar players, I think always are going to have like, it's funny because it seems weird to be like, like, oh, Chris from Propaganda loves Eddie Van Halen, but to me, it's not weird. Cause it's like, if you're a guitar player, like you look at a guy like Eddie Van Halen and you're like, okay, that dude is like a seminal guitar player. Like he has these wicked chops and he fucking shreds. And yeah, he's got his issues as a person, but like when you're a kid, like you look at dudes like that and you're just like, man, one day I want to be able to play like one of his riffs, if I could do one of his riffs, like I could be a guitar player, And also like, the prop guys, they love that stuff.
Yeah.
Like Rush, like probably Van Halen, and I'm trying to think of some of the other weird band. Well, like when we did that split with Chris, when Agassi did that split with Chris, we ended up doing a Voivod cover.
Yeah.
We were gonna do something else. Fuck, I can't remember what it is, but it was like some classic rock song.
Oh, dude, you just totally reminded me that you backed up one of his Patreon virtual 7 inches, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, that was a Voivod song. Yeah.
tell me about working with him for the covers that he did.
It was really cool actually. Like Beef just kind of brought it up one day that Chris does his Patreon and he'll do like covers with a band and then sing on it or whatever. And of course, for us being an instrumental band, it was like, oh, that'd be cool. Like just mix it up a bit and then do something different. We're like, okay, we're like a backing band. We're not doing our usual stuff. We're gonna play a metal song and Chris is gonna sing on it. So it's like
so rad.
Yeah, and then we ended up just kind of being like, at the time it was just kind of like, oh well, hey, if we're going into the studio, like we got a couple of songs, let's bang our 2 songs out too. So yeah, that was a really cool project. It was really fun working with Chris, and for me, like the last number of years, like that's kind of, I've been working in recording studios quite a bit, so it was cool to me. I got a chance to work with Propaganda a few years ago. We recorded that I Am the Rifle song, Rebel Spell.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, so I got a chance to work with them there, which was cool because we recorded the guys playing live, and then being in the studio with Chris again, where he's kind of mostly just singing, and we're the band. That was a cool experience because he's got a lot of records under his belt, and so he's got some tricks up his sleeve for like getting cool sounds and stuff like that. And then yeah, it was a cool experience because like JP, obviously we love JP.
Yeah.
It was just like a bunch of buddies recording some weird, cool stuff, so it was fun.
God, that's awesome. So when you went in there to record with Chris, is that when Agassi recorded the Pulse 1B 2-song single that you all did?
Yeah, that was the 2 songs. Yeah.
Dude, that is so cool that you recorded that in the same session. So you guys were all set up and you just did both?
Yeah. Yeah, we just we had that was our thinking, was just sort of like, we're obviously not financially secure, so
sure.
We're like, is there any way we can finagle maybe getting 2 of ours? Because like you have to book a day to record and a day to mix or whatever. So we were only doing the 1 song, and we'd been practicing it for a while, so we're like, we'll probably be able to do that half a day maybe. So then we just thought, yeah, if there's any time left over, we'll do that. And then it was cool. Chris ended up mixing it for us, so he mixed it in his basement. So.
God, that is awesome. What a nice little, series of events right there. You know what I'm saying? That is just so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. I had a great time doing that. And it made me want to do more stuff like that, actually, like more, just collaborating with people, I think that's something that's kind of sorely lacking in the music world. Often people just, it's like, this is my band and that's what I do, and you're always playing with the same people, which is great, but there's 24 hours in a day. It's like, I'd love to see more people collaborating and mixing it up a little bit, just like have people from this band play with people from this band, just do a couple songs, it's fun.
Well, I absolutely love that, Ryan. So let's talk about like the big picture here. So tell me about, any of your, what you think about the rest of the Propaganda catalog, about their career, and maybe a little bit of what they mean to you as a fan of music in general.
I mean, they're one of those few bands, I guess, for me, the thing that I always respected about Propaganda was, they were never scared to change. They were never scared to just make the music that they wanted to make. I don't think they give a shit about, are the people who like the first record going to like the 5th record? It's like, I always appreciated that they would just, it was like, hey, this is the music we're making, and that's what we're making, and it, not that it was vastly, I guess, if you like the new stuff, I don't see why you wouldn't like, the first couple of 3 records, but yeah, they were, and again, you compare them to their peers of that early 90s, Fat Records, Epitaph kind of world, and who's aged better than Propaganda? Like I've seen a few of those bands since, my other band, Union Stockyards, we opened up for, 10-Foot Pole, 88 Fingers Louie and stuff like that. And it's like, those bands are basically just doing what they did back then. It's like, that's the people who are going to see them are like, oh yeah, like I like, 10-Foot Pole. It's like, I like the Rev, what I mean?
Yeah.
But after Rev, it was like, I didn't really follow that band anymore. And so like, I'll go see them and it's cool, but I really want to see Ref, whereas when you go see Propaganda, you're like, I'm actually more excited to see the new stuff than the old stuff, like I'm glad when they play a song off How to Clean Everything, but I'm like, they could not play anything off the first 2-3 albums and I wouldn't be like, oh, I got ripped off when I went to see it. Like when I went and saw Rush, they didn't play Spirit or Radio. That really bummed me out. I was like, this might be the only time I get to see them again. And if, that's like one of my favorite tunes. I don't think they played Time Stand Still either. Sorry, I'm getting off topic, but
no, it's fine. Did you go to Rush 40, their 40th tour?
Was it their 40th tour? I couldn't tell you,
because like I've seen Rush exactly one time, and it was their last tour ever, and I am so relieved that I dropped $100 and just went.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. A couple of years ago, I made a resolution to myself that whenever one of those old bands comes to town, I'm just gonna go see it, because I've had that a few times where like I didn't go see a band and then they broke up, and it just breaks my heart.
Yep, totally. Like I went and saw that Rush show, and I took my dad, and it was just a surreal experience for both of us. We were on the floor seeing Rush's last tour, and he's like, "Yeah, I saw Rush in like '78," and I'm like, "Geez, Louise, dude, you're like, that's so amazing."
Where did you see that? Was that in the States or was that?
It was in St. Louis, where the St. Louis Blues play.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, good time, man. I completely agree with you, because like now, especially that we can't go see music at the moment, whenever I was growing up, like every year I never stopped going to music. I started going to see music in February of 1998. I saw Blink-182 and the Aquabats on the Dude Ranch tour, and I never stopped.
Not a Blink-182 fan, but there's a couple of good songs on Dude Ranch that I
know. Yeah, Dude Ranch rips. But I never stopped going to music, and I'm so relieved that I went to music even when I was like tired or I had to work the next day. I was like, I'm going to go see it, because I won't be able to see it someday.
Not having shows for basically a year now. It's like, I certainly don't take that for granted, man. I've been going to shows for a long time, but I miss it. I miss playing shows. I miss going to shows. I miss being able to, like our practice spot is right above a venue, and there's like a coffee shop, and there's like a little community there of people that, we all love seeing, and never get to see them. And it sucks. I miss it,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Ryan, this has been a wonderful conversation about Agassi, playing with Beeve and Derek, playing with Chris, How to Clean Everything, I Spy, Winnipeg, Core Fest. We covered a lot of ground, don't you think?
Yeah, we covered a lot. Hell, I could do a whole show on I Spy.
Man, if anybody out there is listening wants to do an I Spy song by song podcast, you need to rope in Ryan here, because that would be the bomb.
I'd be all over that.
All right. Well, Ryan,
it was great talking to you, man. I like I said, I really appreciate you reaching out and wanted to have a conversation. I love talking to people. I love meeting people. So happy to meet you as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, Ryan.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah. Keep making these cool episodes, eh?
Yeah. All right, so that was my fabulous chat with Ryan Nash. You all got to get on that Agassi record if you haven't heard it yet. It's so good. Thank you so much to Ryan for being such an enthusiastic conversation partner. I love having guests on whose lives intersect with propaganda in some ways, because you just see the web. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
And you see the impact that this band has had on the local Winnipeg and Manitoba music scene, and all of the amazing things that have come out of their work, and how many people are inspired by them. I just love hearing stories like Ryan's, like Randy's, like Sam, like Jeff from Whole Lotta Milka. I love these stories from these folks coming out of Winnipeg.
Yeah, as an outsider, Greg, it very much feels like pulling back the curtain and having a glimpse into a world that I just don't know about.
Yeah.
And as a fan, I can read and I can listen and I can follow the Patreon, but those sort of conversations just make it far more enriched and detailed.
Yeah, and I tell you what, man, getting emails and messages from people from Manitoba telling me they like the show, it's like one of the biggest honors for me.
Right. Yeah.
Seeing those messages where it's like, especially if it's like Jamie, our one of our longest listener, Jamie out there, he's so fantastic. And he's always like, oh my gosh, we love that episode. It was so great to hear from Randy. And I just love hearing from people from Manitoba.
It's validating.
It is. It feels
I know
amazing.
nothing about Manitoba. I know nothing about Winnipeg, so I'm faking it. All I know is Propaganda, really.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to see Propaganda in Winnipeg. If it freaking kills me, I will get there. So maybe all the people in Winnipeg can crowd surf me around the Park Theater or something like that. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the music for This Might Be Satire a little bit. I just have a few takes on the music for this one. I'll be a little less, I'll go on a little bit shorter than I normally do for music on this one.
Cool. Yeah, I actually am the same, Greg. And I'll start with the guitar here. And that first intro riff, that main riff that repeats through the first verse, is pretty fun. And it's pretty catchy. And it's the sort of melody that you find all over pop punk, I think, in the years after this record is released. But that over the top whammy bar dive, that really makes me laugh. Like it's really out of place, but it's also kind of not. I don't really know how to describe it. It seems like it wouldn't work, but it does.
I absolutely love the whammy dive too. And, it's a very whistly guitar lick and it just sort of screams Los Angeles 1987 to me, if you listen to some Van Halen from the 80s or the late 70s, I was listening to Van Halen's cover of the Kinks' You Really Got Me. And Eddie does these guitar squeals throughout the entire song that really remind me of what Chris does in the very beginning of this song. And I was like, boom, that's Chris listening to like Van Halen in his bedroom coming up with this and being like, wow, on his whammy bar and just going for it. And so I see some very youthful inspiration coming through on learning guitar with that riff. And, that main catchy riff feels like it would be straight off an early Van Halen record to me. It's clearly done in a style that could have caught on and gotten popular in late 70s to late 80s LA Sunset Strip music scene,
Yeah, and then when Chris sings "Oh Girl, You Know It's True," there's that really unique muted power chord strumming pattern where it's almost like a harmonic with that shimmering sound effect that almost is like a buzzing or a chirping. I don't know. You know what I mean? Where it's but it adds some really cool texture to it. It adds more melody and rhythm. And that leads into then She Tells Me That She Loves Me. And that riff there is super melodic. It's really fun. It has a lot of really cool picked power chords. And I have to say, too, that there's like the transition hammer-ons and pull-offs that are really clear on the remastered version. And I think it just really stands out a lot better there than on the original release.
Yeah, and I was thinking about Chris's vocal performance on this a lot as well. And if you understand that this song is meant to be a joke, which I don't think is 100% evident, and I'll get into later.
Same.
If you understand that this song is meant to be a joke and a critique of certain things within the world, whenever he gives the little affect to words like school, it really just heightens the silliness of it for me.
Yeah.
And, there's a really interesting difference between the demo version and the studio version that I think is absolutely crucial. If you listen to the demo version on How to Clean Everything reissue, the one that Conrad recorded, Chris says not after the line about anal sex. And I wanna fuck you up the ass, not in a far more pronounced way.
Right.
Demo version than on the studio recording. And I wanna kill your books to the demo is so distinct when he says not versus on the record when he goes not, and it's over the music in such a perfectly in sync manner that you almost can't even hear him say it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
For many, many years, I didn't even realize Chris was saying not on the studio version. And to me, that's a really problematic thing. So I had this, like, I was thinking about the vocal performance a lot today, and I was like, man, he really just screams that not on the demo version in a way that he doesn't on the studio version, which I think really takes the song in a significantly different direction that I find to be dark and troubling. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. It definitely clarifies that, yes, it is in fact satire. Like,
Yeah.
you can't really mistake it there. Also, it feels so 90s to have the word not. Being a teacher, I don't remember the last time I really heard students end a sentence like that, where that was like the funniest, coolest thing in the 90s to do so if you're 12 or 13. But I don't know, I have to say, Greg, too, that I kind of really love the "yeah baby."
Yeah.
It's so
yeah baby,
it's so over the top. Again, I think your description of Van Halen really fits perfectly, and I really like the vocals on the live version in Kansas City that I mentioned in 1996.
Yes, he sounded great, didn't he?
Right. Yeah, and I've really made it clear that Chris's style on this record isn't really in my wheelhouse. So I'm not going to like trot over those same things, but he sounds super different. It sounds good. And I think it's just a better version of what would have fit this band at that time.
Definitely. So do you have any thoughts on music before we dive into some of the content here within the lyrics?
I am ready to talk about the lyrics if you are.
All right. So, and before we move on, I think the recording of Kansas City that we keep referring to, I'm pretty sure that is the exact recording that was released as the quote unquote Yep live cassette, which came out on like Apple Core Records in like 1996. I think that the Kansas City set is the version of that was released as that cassette. Cool. And I was messaging with Todd a little bit, and Todd didn't really know anything about the Yep cassette. So he's like, I can't imagine that Chris and Jord would name an album Yep. So, the authenticity of the Yep cassette is something that I would like to investigate further. So if anybody out there has copies of the Yep cassette, I've seen pictures of it, but if anybody has any stories about Yep, feel free to shoot me an email or tweet about it, and we'll retweet you if you have something really awesome to share. That'd be really cool. So the first line is, I want to give a preface to this. I am not going to talk about certain lyrics in this song.
Right.
I am not going to say them out loud into a recording that anybody in the world can hear. There are certain things that I just don't need to say on the internet for many reasons, being a 37-year-old professional with a job and a life. So I'm not going to say certain lines in this song. How do you feel about that, Keith?
I am on board with you, Greg.
So everybody can go and listen to this song. You can read the lyrics for yourself, but there are certain things that I'm going to skip over, but I will refer to certain lines, like I said earlier, as the anal sex line. I'll say that, but I'm not going to really go into more detail specifically, just because of how I feel about it. So we have this first line: I want to chew my bubble gum with you, and I want to walk you home from school. I want to carry your books to every class. And then we have the line about anal sex, and then the not in parentheses. So anyway, I think it's hugely important to talk about Chris's obvious discomfort with the anal sex line in the song. In the original version, like I said, he basically screams not after that line. And in the lyrics on the website, he has not written in parentheses as well. Mm-hmm. And as much as I hate that line, I can only imagine how much Chris hates that line right now. Do you know? You know what I mean?
Oh, if he were to talk about this, I don't see him doing a Patreon episode on this song, but maybe just in the comments with some listener and subscriber questions, I could see him maybe sharing some of his thoughts on it.
Yeah. So on the surface, I have always struggled with this song. When someone is young, so this is the first Propaganda record I ever heard when I was 14. And when you're that young, it's hard to process what satire actually is. You know what I mean? Satire can be extremely obvious, and it can be significantly more covert, right? There are varying degrees of satire used with varying degrees of effectiveness. So these messages creep in of holding hands, being romantic, and then anal sex, right? It goes from these like very gentle, very cute behaviors into one of the most like challenging and aggressive forms of sexual intercourse that people can have. And I can't even imagine how many very, very uninformed or young or lazy people would have heard this song, not even cared about that the song had the word satire in the title, because people would rip open a CD, throw it in the CD player, and they would put the case like on the seat next to them or stack it on the shelf, right? So unless you are very, very carefully reading what the songs are called, thinking about it, understanding the lyrics, and then internalizing the tone of the lyrics and the words themselves, you also have to internalize the concept of what satire actually is. And if you're 14, that's a big ask. You know what I mean? To me, that's an issue. So I just take issue with this tune because unless you can assure that your audience knows what satire is, if you know your audience will see and mentally process the title of the song, and unless you can assure that, teenagers are definitely not going to walk away with the idea that holding someone's hand and carrying books will automatically lead then to anal sex, that series of events troubles me,
Oh, absolutely, Greg. I think about myself at 13 or 14 with a set of Jerky Boys CDs and Adam Sandler comedy albums and my
100%.
share of Insane Clown Posse albums. And this would probably have been one of my favorite songs on the album for the wrong reason, for the exact reason that you're saying.
Exactly. Well, so unless a listener understands that satire by definition is the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose and criticize people's stupidity or vices, particularly in the context of contemporary politics and other topical issues, they can understand that this song is making fun of the quid pro quo nature of sexuality within patriarchal society that has often portrayed women as sexual playthings who can be done the merest of services. I will carry your books, I will hold your hand, and then you will perform advanced forms of eroticism with me because I did the bare minimum. Heck, I was even doing something on my other podcast last week, and I was talking about the book of Esther from the Bible. And in the book of Esther, the queen is deposed for being disobedient, and then girls are kidnapped from around the country and brought before the king. And then whoever pleasures the king most thoroughly will be made the new queen, while the others remain as concubines. So I see this song as completely making fun of the tired, sweet, innocent boy meets beautiful girl of his dreams, which then leads to him chasing her rejecting him, or her reciprocating his interest. And then he screws her over and they break up, leaving him totally heartbroken, and her being presented as some cruel villain for breaking this poor young man's heart and soul. So, I just have some issues, because it does ask a lot of an audience who is made up of young people in 1993 to understand what is happening with the title, with Chris's little hints that this is like a critique and not a serious song. But I didn't know that it was a joke when I heard this song for the first time in late 1997,
Oh, absolutely. And, I've been listening to this record for, I don't know, close to 2 decades, not as long as most of our listeners. And I've spent more time thinking about it this week than I have ever, because I always just kind of wrote it off as a dumb song that I didn't need to think about more, which is therein is the problem.
Yeah. And so when I thought this song may not have been a joke in the late 90s, I was thinking to myself earlier today, what else was I doing in the late 90s that could have shaped my psyche and my views of women and my views of sex in sort of twisted ways? Okay. So I made a list of some of the movies that I watched a lot back then. And I was like, in the late 90s, like super into like 90s romantic comedies that were aimed at teenagers or depicting teenagers, like the movie She's All That with Freddie Prinze Jr. In that movie, the main character is referred to as scary and unapproachable by Freddie Prinze Jr., who is like the big man on campus, and she's like the nerdy artist.
Right.
And he takes a bet to date her. So he bets on her with his friends. He then stalks her and treats her poorly, and she just like lets it slide. Even though she's like depicted in the film as being a feminist, like she just like, her friends say to her, the cutest guy on campus is like stalking you and you're not even a bit curious. And then she just like lets it slide. And I'm like, well, that's not realistic at all. Thank you, all male writers room in that film script room. And then another one is like Clueless, where the dude from Scrubs, one of the doctors from Scrubs is in that movie, and he refers to his partner as woman for the entire movie, like literally the entire time. You brought up Adam Sandler earlier. Do you remember that movie Big Daddy that he was in?
I do.
He continually demeans another woman who is a doctor because she once worked at Hooters. Like he talks trash about her working at Hooters the entire movie.
Right.
And the whole time he's ripping on her, he's unemployed, right? And she's a doctor.
Perfect, of course.
I mean, it's just so spot on. And as a teacher, do you remember when Forrest Gump's mom sleeps with the principal to get him admitted into school?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, remember how insanely popular American Pie was 20 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
I watched a few clips from that movie today where the guy says to the woman, "Suck me," in the car. And I about like had a heart attack. I was like, I can't believe how popular this movie was when I was like a sophomore. And I was just sick. I have a couple more. Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams is basically a story of a dad stalking his ex-wife and ignoring court orders. The movie 10 Things I Hate About You. I remember a dude in that movie was like a total jerk, blocked in Julia Stiles' car. He calls her a bitch when she calls him out on it. And then her dad says the reason she got mad at him was her PMS. And, I watched all these movies so many times, dude, and I had no ability to dissect what was happening. And the amount of trash that was filling my brain day in, day out, year after year is immeasurable. And I know this propaganda song is mocking all of that trash I just talked about, but I did not understand that for a long time.
Yeah.
When I was listening to this CD every day and like watching these movies.
Yeah, Greg, the only movie that I would add to your list, and it's one that I revisited recently only to discover there's already been a ton of discourse on it, is High Fidelity. I watched it again. I was like, wait a second. I don't remember this.
He's a jerk, isn't he?
Sick to my stomach before, to where I like it. I don't think I can watch that movie again now. And then, of course, it sent me to read just a ton of write-ups about the problems in reviewing and how this narcissistic, manipulative character that is celebrated as being kind of like not even an anti-hero, just a straight up hero.
Yeah.
That made me really question what that would mean in the mid 2000s when I saw it. And I thought like, oh, that guy's awesome. And this movie's great. And it's funny.
He wins her back from the evil hippie who stole her away from him. And he wins her back and all is right in the world. And his behavior the entire time when he's trying to do it is totally inexcusable. Were you listening to a lot of like emo or anything like that in the late 90s? Like that Vagrant Records kind of stuff?
I had a Dashboard Confessional album, and I think the first Taking Back Sunday, but I think if that's the style you're referring to, that's about as deep as I went.
So for a while, I was kind of into like Death Cab for Cutie. I was really into like Saves the Day.
Sure, yeah.
I was, into Sublime for a while, as people are wont to do in the 90s when you see that Sublime Sun logo t-shirt in the 7th grade hallway and you're like, what's that? But like, the second thing this might be satire, makes me think about is like the entitlement and the utterly pathetic heartbroken boy trope of the late 90s and early 2000s alternative rock and emo scene that like Rob in High Fidelity depicts as well pretty well. It's like this person who had his heart ripped out of his chest and you feel so badly for him the whole time because he's in serious pain, And I was thinking back on a Saves the Day record, Through Being Cool. It was one of my favorite albums. And there's a song in there called Hollyhocks Forget-Me-Nots, which was like the song I would listen to when I was super sad over like some type of high school relationship that wasn't going my way.
Yeah.
Because it should go my way, shouldn't it?
But that's what culture has taught us, right?
Dude, it totally is. And the lyrics in that song read, "Oh, I've had it now. I'm walking down to your house, banging on the door. Please, 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 Mr. Hawks, won't you tell your daughter I'm all alone and I'm not handling this well? You never know what you have until you get it yanked out of your chest." So who's the villain here, right? Is it this guy, this sensitive guy who's so sad, but he's stalking this person, showing up where he is not invited. And he's basically saying that he has essentially been murdered by having his heart ripped out of his chest by this evil person who is depicted on the other end of this song, whose story you don't get to hear, And I'm left wondering, what did the person who got dumped do to get dumped? We never hear the other sides of these stories that depict women as so evil in these songs that we grew up on, me especially. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying Chris from Saves the Day did anything specifically horrendous to this girl. It could be 100% fictitious for all I know, just for the sake of
right.
a story in a song. But there are so many aggrieved songs like this one written by men, many of whom likely did do horrible things to the girls that they then trashed in their own songs publicly on stage for years and years in front of crowds of thousands of people. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like that sounds like the song version of John Cusack standing in the rain, calling repeatedly from the payphone outside of his ex's apartment.
Yep, exactly. And I went back and I revisited some Death Cab today as well, too. And there's a song called I Will Possess Your Heart by Death Cab for Cutie, where Ben Gibbard sings, "How I wish you could see the potential of you and me. It's like a book elegantly bound, but in a language that you can't read." And I'm like, That's so gross. That's so creepy. It's like I have the translation to our story that you don't get to understand yet, but I have the key. So if you just follow me blindly, I will reveal this prophecy to you about why you and I belong together. And I'm just like, barf, right?
Yeah.
If you ever read the lyrics to The Wrong Way by Sublime, if you haven't, you should. It's horrendous. Or It's So Easy by Guns N' Roses, track 2 on Appetite for Destruction. It's insane. And this kind of songs, of which there are countless, this stuff makes me realize just how important songs like White Boy by Bikini Kill or Dead Men Don't Rape by 7 Year Bitch truly are in response to the they're asking for it mentality of rape and stalking culture that generations of men were raised within, me and you included. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing like Warren Women's first record comes to mind as well.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that first opening line there?
Well, Greg, I think you gave a pretty solid mental
I'm so sorry.
inventory check. No, of everything that we've been shown in TVs and movies, or I mean, also comes to mind is like music videos, just the mindless crap that this song makes fun of. But think about what people have been led to think about sex as a result of this. You mentioned it, like this false promise or false assumption that because a significant other, especially men, is kind or helpful to someone else, then the reward is sex.
Yeah.
That having sex is a result and condition of being a good person to others rather than building and nurturing a relationship that is based on trust and consent and support.
Yeah.
So with that, I have to say that I'm really proud of some of the resources that my school has been showing my students lately regarding things like bullying, but also sexual harassment and sexual assault, especially the absolutely clear language used in addressing consent. I honestly was really proud and glad to have these resources in class. So we didn't have these things, these conversations at school or in my home when I was 14.
Nope.
What consent meant, what it looked and sounded like, and that it was required every single physical encounter, that clothing doesn't mean anything, that doesn't have anything to do with consent, that if a person can say one thing, or that doesn't mean they can mean something else. And although it's really uncomfortable sometimes to address these things with my students, it's super important and it's necessary to have these types of conversations and to keep having them. So I think my thoughts or comments here might seem like a heavy tangent, but this culture of hypersexuality that the band is making fun of here makes me think of all of the discourse over incels over the last few years. Given how harmful ideas of sex have continued to boil over, certainly since the song has been released. So that word incel means involuntary celibate. And though it is associated with incredibly dark corners of the internet where toxic masculinity and misogyny have spilled over into real world cases of murder perpetuated by men who hate women specifically for depriving them of sex. But I found this out researching this week, Greg, that the origin of the term is quite different from what I would have assumed, and I think most people would assume if they hear that term today. So a woman coined the term in the 1990s in an online forum meant to create a supportive community. And the person has only released her first name, Alana, and it was Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project. And it was for people who were unable to find sexual partners, maybe because of inexperience or discomfort, awkwardness, gender nonconformity, or even mental health struggles. So it was a really diverse online gathering of people with different gender and sexual identities, which is equal parts, I think, tragic and sad given what the term means now. And this founder ultimately said, It was not virulent hatred. It was just ignorance and objectification. So talking about the like what this has evolved and warped into. And Alana said there was nothing like the hostility, hatred, and misogyny that is happening now. And this person has gone and expressed their struggle of guilt and thinking that they've created a movement that transformed into a violent, sexist, misogynistic sect that often overlaps with other supremacist ideologies
Yeah.
and right-wing conspiracies.
Mm-hmm.
And so like how it's different now. So the communities are immersed in misinformation about evolution, about genetics, about psychology, and conspiracy theories, including the belief that there is a sexual marketplace where successful men, who are known as chads, often have multiple sexual partners, and attractive women, known as Stacies, get to take their pick, while men that society considers to be too unattractive or awkward to have sexual partners, they're denied sex against their will. And this has culminated in misogynistic communities where men threaten violence and rape, which ultimately led to Reddit, I think it was 4 years ago, shutting down one of the largest incel message boards. So, I mean, there are also just numerous cases of violence stemming from this belief that because a person was unable to have sex, that they weren't given the sex that they are assuming that they've been like promised, that they are guaranteed, they've acted out in violence, against others. So like a really famous example in Isla Vista in California in 2014, where a self-proclaimed incel killed 6 people and injured 14 with the goal to, quote, punish all females for the crime of depriving me of sex.
Mm.
In 2018 in Toronto, there was another man with ties to incel communities who drove a rented van into a crowd, killing 10 and injuring 18, and posting just hours before about the Isla Vista attack on social media, stating that the incel rebellion has already begun. We will overthrow all the Chads and the Stacys. And another man killed 9 people and injured 8 others at a community college in Roseburg, Oregon. And then 2 died in a school shooting in Aztec, New Mexico. And the killer had previously posted online using the pseudonym of the Isla Vista killer in California, which I'm not going to say these people's names. And then even the school shooting at Stoneman Douglas, where 17 people died. The killer also had ties to incel forums.
Ugh.
So I know this all seems like a heavy tangent, but looking to see what happens, right, when there is this culture, when the music, the TV, the radio, the movies, all of these things have this promise, and there is this culture and narrative that men are deserving of, and it is our guarantee and right to have sex, and what we get to do if we are deprived of that. It doesn't say anything about fostering relationships and building connections with people, or learning about ourselves and learning about others. It's simply people respond by acting out aggression and violence against others.
It's so crazy that a song like this, where when we decided to do this song a few weeks ago, I was like, oh yeah, that'll be like a light week. You know what I mean? And then
I thought the same thing.
And then before you know it, I'm like researching all the 90s movies that like I didn't have the mental capacity to critique years ago when I was taking them in constantly over and over on like my dubbed VHS tapes.
Right.
Because you couldn't just watch anything. So if you got movies on a cassette, you would like watch it many times because you couldn't just stream the next thing.
It was your movie. It was the movie you had.
It was like, well, I guess I'm going to watch, She's All That for the 17th time this month. And like, we have this next line here. Oh, girl, it's true how much I love you. I want to sing it across the land. Won't you hold my hand? And this is like the pre-sex way that men go all in on a relationship. You know what I mean? Before men have had sex in a relationship, they tend to go all in, only to get oftentimes what they want, especially in their early years of dating, right? This is like a public profession of love for all the world to hear. And it feels like a massive con perpetrated by men on women. If everybody in the world knows how incredibly sincere you are in your love, and I'm obviously being very sarcastic right now, if a person screams it from the rooftops, I love Jane, and they say it over and over and over, people are gonna be like, wow, he must really love Jane. It's like this like demonstration of sincerity, right? And if you show it enough in public to everybody, surely you deserve all the carnal rewards that come with it, right? Isn't that the message such depictions and entertainment provide to young women? If a guy feels that intensely about you, what is the way to reward that intensity? The covert messaging is clearly sex. But if a girl were running around in a society saying how much she loved a particular boy, people would look at that woman doing that like she'd lost her mind. The magnificent double standard of sexism, where guys get a pass as passionate and are seen as romantic, and women are portrayed as nuts.
Right.
I hate it. I hate it. And then, like, there's this line, she tells me that she loves me. Now I'm going to tell her that I love her. She tells me that she loves me. Now I'm going to try and sleep with her. This line is chilling, dude, because it is a mathematic equation. It's transactional. So let's look at this piece by piece. She tells me that she loves me. So person one genuinely tells other human a sincere phrase of deep affection. Now I'm going to tell her that I love her. Human two computes human one's phrase, runs internal calculus that says, if I love you is reciprocated, it likely means sex. And if I say I don't love you, it means likely no sex. So the internal calculus computes the equation of, if I say XYZ, whether or not it is genuine, I will be able to do this or I won't be able to do this. So if person two says I love you, then sex is the result. It means that a consequence-free ghosting of that person after sex can also occur. And it's really a disgrace. So clearly, that is what Chris is critiquing here, right? He's not supporting this, obviously. Right. It's a critique. But again, if a listener doesn't know what satire is, it basically says, if she loves you, you say it back, and then you can have sex with her because of the mathematical calculation. It's just upsetting. And it reminds me of, like, another song. I was thinking about, like, the Lawrence Arms have a song about the Warped Tour, where the lyric is like, I got a bad taste in the back of my mouth from the time spent on the back of the bus, which is about sexual assault, obviously. And I'm thinking, like, about these transactional things where this person says something genuine, person two says something that is not genuine. The act then occurs, and then the person who wasn't genuine can walk away having gotten what they wanted. And then the person who did mean what they said in the first place is now abandoned. And it makes me sick,
Not only maybe perhaps did something they didn't want, but also now are losing that first condition of the love. Yeah. And Greg, earlier, when I really laughed when you were reading the Death Cab Cutie, Death Cab for Cutie lyrics.
Oh man,
I laughed so hard because, just for the listeners, he was reading and he was making this like super tortured face, right? And it was like super tortured. It was all squinchy. But then when you said, and yeah, that was just gross, but you kept the same face. And so that's why I laughed so hard. And I bring that up because you reading those lyrics, they sound just as pathetic as like that saves the day knocking on the door, or
truly
that I have the translation for what our relationship or our love means. And, I have a lot of gripes about this song, but I do think here the lyrics really capture the lack of self-awareness on the part of the person who's singing this, who mistakenly equates love with sex or some sort of agreement with sex, whose actions or either performative, like you shared, like just repeating it, shouting the love in hopes of convincing the partner to have sex, or it's contradictory in that the love itself isn't enough. And this person wants to just move directly on to the physical part of the relationship. But it takes me back to the idea of why things like, you brought up American Pie, why that was so popular in the first place. Well, sex sells. So make the lyrics even more dumb to point out how much pop culture shapes and is shaped by sexuality. I mean, particularly a marketable version of sexuality. So what's ironic, I think, is that songs like this predict a particularly widespread and successful strain of punk that combine sex and humor in a way that just raked in the cash in the early 90s and the 2000s. And
Yeah.
I don't care much about like how catchy the riff is or how good the drummer is. I just rather listen to the Dead Kennedys than a musical version of Porky's or American Pie. So, Greg, although the song is satire, like you've said, like if it's not clear enough, it's not explicit enough, perhaps that's a problem. And
Yeah.
I'm not putting that on the band, but I mean, the title literally says it. It says that this is satire. But scrolling through the YouTube comments shows that a pretty large chunk of the 90s punk fans pretty much missed the point. I mean, one comment said,
Hold that thought.
"Oh, you want me to wait on it?"
Well, yeah, just for a second, okay?
Yeah.
And then we had this last line in the song that it says, "But where the hell are my priorities? Left in the hands of the authorities." Yeah, baby. So this is such a dark, humorous line, but it's so chilling, right? It reminds me of how much sexual assault has gone unreported to the authorities. Like according to something I found at the Brennan Center, 80% of rapes and sexual assaults go unreported. And in fact, the historically low rate of unreported rapes is the reason why research on rape is so hard to track within trends in sexual violence, because we know about almost none of it.
Man.
And the Brennan Center reports reasons for non-reporting, which are just as sad. 20% of people don't report because they worry about retaliation, not just from perpetrators, but from society at large. All you gotta do is watch the Christine Blasey Ford hearings for perfect example of that. 13% of people in the studies said that they think the police won't do anything to help, and 8% said they didn't think the rape or sexual assault was important enough to report. And studies done by RAIN and reported by the Washington Post demonstrate that 1% of reported rape cases receive a felony conviction. 1% of reported rapes lead to felony convictions. So when Chris says left in the hands of the authorities, he may very well be singing about how men get away with sexually violent behavior in nearly every circumstance. And that was just like something else that I found that I needed to tack on there too, because like that left in the hands of the authorities line is so messed up because it's so true. Because when left in the hands of the authorities, jack squat happens. So now I want to hear about YouTube comments. What did you find? Tell me how Propaganda fans sort of like missed the point of the entire satirical nature of the song.
For sure. Well, there's one that says, this is Winnipeg in the 1990s, skating and smoking weed, trying to get laid. You'd know if you'd been there. And there was another that specifically said, like, I want to sing this song, and it named a person. And maybe I'm missing something. Maybe they know them. Maybe it's a song that they like together. I don't know. But, related to this, seeing how people respond to, say, the song Pervert by the Descendants. When they heard about it from Grand Theft Auto 5, not having any familiarity with the band, probably not the best song to include, as people miss the point by saying, yeah, this song perfectly describes me. Like, well, that's not a good thing. So, Greg, I think I want to jump back to just the idea of the satire. I think it's somehow overshadowed. And maybe sex is that pervasive to where people just hear or see sex and the blinders go on and they don't really question what was happening when it appears in a song or a show or a movie, or people just aren't that smart. I don't know. Regardless, people miss that it's satire. And again, I want to clarify that I don't think that is not Propagandy's fault, but it really reminds me of something that always stuck with me that Dave Chappelle said after he stepped away from the limelight in the mid 2000s. Remember, he had those really irregular public appearances. He was at the height of the Chappelle Show. He said that while taping a sketch for the Chappelle Show, it was about magic pixies that embodied stereotypes about different races. So Chappelle was playing a black pixie who wore blackface, and he went around trying to convince people to act in stereotypical ways. And while recording this, which he thought was like this satire, this scathing condemnation of racism and the energy and the like all of the weight we put into stereotypes and how often we are like convinced by them. He said on the set that a white man laughed at like the wrong part, which made him question the impact of his work with that show. That was he challenging stereotypes or was he reinforcing them? And that if he was out there making the show where he's addressing things like racial inequality and racist beliefs, but people keep yelling Rick James at him every time that he went to, he was performing the profound stand-up with all of these really, challenging ideas. What was the message being lost? So the band seems to be making some statement about the vacuous nature of pop culture by including what is essentially an expendable track, because bands that range from everything from glam to punk and metal to pop had some version of Girl, You Know It's True on their albums. And I think it just seemed to go over a lot of people's heads, not everybody's, but it definitely went over some. And I mean, I just think of this, Greg, like try to think of the words that you would use to describe the people who would go see Propagandy only after hearing the song Refusing to Be a Man, right? Now do the same thing for this song. Like, how would you describe the people who are like, oh, we got to go see that band who wrote this song with these lines? And maybe that's unfair. I don't know. But I just don't have a particularly positive mental image of the people who would count this as like one of their favorite songs of all time.
Yeah. And
because it could be for the wrong reason.
Yeah. And it does ask a lot of the audience to, like I said earlier, understand satire, understand the definition of satire. It asks the audience to actually know the name of the song and put the pieces together, and to catch that obscured knot, which is on the studio version, which is way different than the demo version where he screams it. And, I also got to give Chris some credit, because when they played this song live in the 90s, instead of talking about doing anal sex to a girl, he talked about doing it to a guy in the audience.
Right. He points.
He would point at a particular guy in the audience and say, I want to do it with that guy. And I was like, awesome. That is the best, because like it just flips it, right? And it for women for generations and generations who have been like, pawed at and poked and prodded and hugged when they didn't want to be hugged and kissed when they didn't want to be kissed, and put into situations that they didn't really particularly want to be in. For Chris to put that on a guy in the room who probably had never had anybody say that to him before, who had never made him feel like an expendable receptacle, if you will,
an object.
It's powerful. And I'm not saying that guys should feel like expendable objects either, but for Chris to understand that all of the girls in the room had probably felt like that before, and none of the boys had felt like that before. And for him to do that, I mean, that's pretty wild, man, especially in 96. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well,
I found,
let's see. Did you get any other YouTube?
I found a comment on that 96 video performance.
Okay.
where the person simply wrote, "Shut up and play." And it's possible the person who wrote that is joking.
Maybe it's satire.
Which is what I would like to believe, right? I want to give this person the benefit of the doubt and say, I would like to believe that this is a joke. But I also think it's possible they're not joking.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, just boring. If they're not joking, it's boring. When people say things like shut up and play or keep your politics out of XYZ, all I hear translated is, I don't want to hear critique about something that personally keeps me pampered and comfortable in my little bubble of what makes my life great, even if it means keeping others down. That's what I hear when people say shut up and play. What it really means is don't shine a light on what benefits me while keeping others down. So I really hope that person was joking, but that's the only YouTube comment that really jumped out at me.
Yeah, I found two. One is, it says, this song is a satire version about how every generic band writes about how much they love somebody. And another, though this isn't one that's really going to add any profundity. It says, wait, you people in the comments are debating whether or not a song called This Might Be Satire is satirical. This is why punk died, because it got overrun with idiots.
I love that person. Whoever you are out there, if you hear this, you're awesome. Keith, what does this song leave you with? What message do you take away from this?
Yeah, Greg, this is a hard one because we're talking about a song that's meant to make fun of other things. And I can't help but think I've overthought it already. I don't know. But I guess my overall teachable moment is that just because something is satire, it doesn't mean that it's above criticism.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not a free pass to say, oh, it's satire, or hey, I was just joking. And though I don't use sarcasm, say like in my classroom directed at my students, I do use it regarding, say, current events or just like incredibly infuriating or frustrating details in history.
Yeah.
So I don't think the song and its message really landed for the people who needed to hear it the most. And I think the band was actually aware of that. And that, for me, explains how absolutely crystal clear, unambiguous, and unmistakable the band's intentions and lyrics and messages are on Let's Talk More Rock. So, like, while satire is a powerful tool in critiquing mass media and culture, sometimes so is just being absolutely straightforward.
You know, I hadn't even considered how this particular song may have led to a shift in tone in Let's Talk More Rock. Didn't even consider that the whole time we've been sitting here talking or thinking about this song the last couple of weeks. I am really glad that you said that, because I think that you're probably right. I think that something like this, which did go over the heads of far too many people, led to the writing of the song Let's Talk More Rock in particular.
Yeah.
So for me, I get what this song is critiquing: the overt mistreatment of women in our society, the rampant and obscene rates with which men have gone unpunished for sexual violence, the culture of mixed messages people are exposed to regarding sexuality. It's stunning to an absolutely disgusting degree. And it's insanely important that we continue to do better. I hear the term cancel culture a lot these days, and cancel culture is constantly in the news, but I'm just so over the rewarding of horrendous work that glorifies manipulative behavior, makes gross people and ideas absurdly wealthy, covertly asks young women growing up to tacitly accept the messages of like Axl Rose on Appetite for Destruction or whatever. And I'm ready for society to be beyond that. So I get what the band is trying to do, but like I said several times, it really, it's too subtle for a topic that's this important. And so, you know, I understand it. I'm glad that we talked about it. And, you know, that's kind of where I stand on it now. So do you want to do the honors of rating the song?
I can't help but think, but the people who wanted us to talk more about How to Clean Everything are kind of regretting it now and just want us to go back to failed states.
Dude, but you got to remember, we haven't done Anti-Manifesto.
Sure,
We haven't done Hate Myth Muscle Etiquette. We haven't done Middle Finger Response. We haven't done Stick to Flag. There's so many rippers on this album that we haven't even touched on yet. And
Right.
I'm sort of saving them for a special time. You know, I'm not one. I kind of see myself saving all the really amazing, my favorites of How to Clean Everything for later. I'm not in like a massive hurry to be all done with them, you know?
No, that makes sense. Well, Greg, I got to say, like, I have enjoyed this conversation far more than I've enjoyed the song.
Me too.
I don't really like it. I don't really listen to it. I get what it wanted to do, but I think even in like that era, the band was smart enough to take on some of those topics with more wit and more weight. So I'm just going to give this a 1.
Yep. I'm going to give it a 1 also. Good music, good riffs, good melody, good song. If we talk about songwriting, good song, sounds great. The lyrics missed the mark for me a little bit because while Propaganda has always asked a lot of their audience as far as mental agility to decipher lessons, this one requires people to have knowledge of a particular literary style that they just might not know about. And people could literally read this as a song glorifying aggressive sexual behavior, stalking, etc., which entirely misses the point of the song. But as someone who personally missed the point of this song for years myself, I can personally attest to being guilty of overlooking the point. And so I'm just shining a light on the fact that my own ignorance for so many years about this song leads me to believe that that is likely true for many other people as well, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's our episode on This Might Be Satire. And it was totally rocking to have Ryan Nash from Agassi as our guest on this one. I love having a local Winnipeg musician who knows the band, who's a lifelong fan, who plays with Beeve. It's truly an honor that that Ryan picked the song. So I'm so glad that we had such a great guest for This Might Be Satire, because I didn't know if we were going to get a guest for a song like this one. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
It's kind of like when Mikey Erg picked Government Cartoons. It's kind of like an overlooked song that I was worried that we wouldn't have a guest and maybe we would just do it by ourselves, which that's fine. You know, I think some of our listeners out there want us to have fewer guests sometimes so that the episodes won't be 2 hours. But, you know, we give you everything here at Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propaganda. And if you want to tell us about it, you can find us on Instagram at PropagandaPod, on Twitter at PropagandaPod, and as always, the email is propagandapod@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. This Might Be Satire, and we will see you next time for a total banger.
She tells me that she loves me, I'm gonna try and fuck her. But where the hell are my priorities? Left in the hands of the authorities. Yeah! Baby! Why won't you hold my hand? Why won't you hold my hand? Why won't you hold my